Family Fights with Kyle Harrison and Matthew Blumenthal. Boom, there's your intro. How'd I do?
Thank you, Chael, as always, for that rockin' intro. Welcome back to the Family Fights podcast. I'm Kyle Harrison, with you as always, with my little cousin, Matthew Blumenthal.
What is up, guys? How are you?
And we are here to talk some UFC with you guys. We're going to get right into it today, starting off with some current events and matchups. Deiveson Figueiredo coming out calling Moreno a traitor, saying he's going to knock him out with Henry Cejudo in his corner. What do you think, Matthew?
It's definitely odd since the end of last fight. It ended with Figueiredo holding Moreno on his shoulders, walking around, calling him the champ. And then now, just a few months later, calling him a traitor, saying he's going to knock him out. I don't know the full story with Cejudo and Moreno, but I'd love to know it. And it's just odd that this has changed from a friendly rivalry to a kind of bloodshed rivalry.
Do you know what I think? I think Deiveson Figueiredo is the kind of fighter who motivates himself off of conflict, and he's not going to perform to the best of his ability unless he has a reason to hate the guy standing across from him. So honestly, in the last fight and this fight, I think he's just manufacturing these beefs in his head so he has an excuse to hate Brandon Moreno in a sense, and then he'll be able to get in the mindset to fight him. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's fair, because I definitely perform better when I don't like the guy across from me. And
right, but Deiveson Figueiredo takes it to an extreme.
And you can see that because in the last fight, he didn't hate him as much as he's hated other opponents, and he definitely got caught and didn't look like himself.
Right. Anyways, moving on. An exciting matchup announced over the week. Colby Covington versus Jorge Masvidal headlining UFC 272. This is going to be exciting. This is such a good matchup for the fight and for the beef and for selling it. It's going to be such a good pay-per-view. What are your thoughts on the matchup?
I love the matchup. I think it's really interesting that this is I'm not going to be exact, so don't hold me to it, but this is the first time we've ever had a pay-per-view headliner that's not a championship with two guys coming off losses. So that just speaks to how big these guys are even in the sport. Even when they're coming off of losses, they headline cards.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I agree. This is a big moment for the sport. It's just going to be a huge fight. I don't want to talk too much about it right now because we have a lot of breakdowns to do later. But moving on. Sterling versus Yan finalized. Is it? Are we going to see the fight?
I think we are. And if we don't, I think it's going to be Sterling pulling out. And I think if he pulls out again, then that's the end of his career.
Yeah, I think they strip him if he pulls out again. No question. I think he knows that, so I don't think he will.
Yeah, I watched their first fight back, and the first round was very. It was
Aljamain
competitive
looked terrible,
for the first
didn't
part,
he?
And then
no, Aljamain looked sloppy. He looked frantic. It wasn't good.
Hold on, my fucking headphones are talking to me.
Anyways. Yeah, Sterling did not look good in that first fight. We're going to move on to the next topic while Matthew figures out his headphones.
My bad, guys. I think I'm back.
All right, word. Alexander Volkanovski getting the Korean Zombie for the title shot. I guess it's the option that makes the most sense. A couple episodes ago, at the very end, I mentioned that the rumor mill was turning that this was going to be the fight, and it is confirmed. I guess it makes the most sense out of anyone at featherweight, but I think it's going to be a really easy fight for Alexander Volkanovski.
I do too. I think it's going to be slightly closer than people are anticipating. I think people are going to say it's just going to be an absolute dog walk for Volk. I don't know if it's going to be a dog walk, but I definitely think it's going to be a dominant performance for him.
Yes, I think it will be nothing short of a dominant performance. Let's move on to the real meat and potatoes of this episode. We're going to be breaking down the card that's coming up tomorrow because this episode comes out on Friday. UFC Vegas 46, Calvin Kattar versus Giga Chikadze, the headliner. We have Calvin Kattar at plus 198, Giga Chikadze at minus 250. Matthew, you want to start with this one?
We're starting with the main event?
Yeah.
Okay. This is definitely an interesting fight. I think people are underestimating Calvin. On my notes on him, I have said that he is very good. he does a very good job of slipping back with his feet when he's getting low kicked, and he kind of, instead of checking it, slides back, and that could be important because Giga does throw good leg kicks, and he does get inside decently, but when he's inside, he's very good. He was landing his jab against Holloway, who was a long fighter, but that was really all that he was landing, and Giga definitely has low output and just puts his back to the fence and looks to counter a lot. But I think I'm going to go with my gut here. My gut is telling me that Chikadze is going to take this one.
Okay. Yeah, I totally disagree with the odds here. I think this line is completely wide at plus 198 and minus 250. I think there's a lot of recency bias going into this line just because of how much of a beating Calvin Kattar took in his last fight. Anyways, Giga's a former kickboxer. He might be one of the best strikers that the UFC has to offer. He's really good at controlling range with his kicks, and he has amazing eye feints. He sets up head kicks by looking at the body and vice versa. And what I mean by that is he'll kick you once really hard in the body, and then he'll look you back in the eyes. And as he's looking you in the eyes, he'll communicate with you. Like, if you've never been in a fight, you don't know this. But you can look at a guy after you hit him and know that you hurt him by the way he looks back at you. And then he'll redirect his eyes back to your body, but the kick will go high. So you think that he's going to kick you in the body again, but then he kicks high. He did this against Jamie Simmons. He also did this against Edson Barboza. So that's like one of his best weapons. That's why they call it the Giga kick. It's really his eyes that's selling that. But he has really low output, which drives me crazy. He throws like sometimes single-digit strikes per round, which I don't like, and I think Calvin Kattar is going to be able to take advantage of that, given that Calvin Kattar is such a tank with incredibly clean boxing. He's really talented at utilizing tempo, meaning he'll throw a bunch of really slow punches that aren't even necessarily meant to land, and then he'll mix in a really fast one that lands hard and stings you out of nowhere. And like Matthew said, he utilizes his jab really well by throwing 4 or 5 jabs out there really fast and then mixing in a quick left hook. You think he's just going to throw another jab, but then all of a sudden there's a left hook smacking you in the face. That's what I mean by utilizing tempos. He's one of the only guys in the UFC that throws combos at different tempos where not the whole combo is hard, which is a skill that you get from having lots of boxing experience. I think hopefully he's learned a lot from the Holloway fight, and he could have a chance late. People are forgetting how much of a dog he is. He's never been knocked out. Anyways, this is a really interesting fight. I think if Calvin can stay off of his back foot and keep the fight at his range, he'll definitely have a chance at getting the upset, maybe even a finish. However, if he thinks he's going to walk through Giga's liver kicks like he's used to walking through pain to get into boxing range, he's going to have a rude awakening coming.
Yeah.
My pick is going to be Kattar by KO, though.
Okay. I see where you're coming from with the low output and that kind of stuff. And something I noticed from Giga is that, yes, he has low output, but when he fires, it's very explosive. It's either with that massive liver kick or with a big 1-2 that goes straight down the pipe when his back's to the fence. And one thing I noticed while watching film earlier today was that when Calvin gets pressured, his hands come up, but his elbows come up too, and it leaves his entire body exposed. So if Giga can throw a 1-2 and then throw his liver kick, I could definitely see it going like that. And
yes.
Giga also has a good check hook. So if Calvin thinks he can just walk straight without changing the angles, it's going to be an issue for him. And if you're not trained in fighting, what I mean by changing angles is when I'm going to go into punching range, I'm not going to walk straight into you. I'm going to go from the side or at a 45-degree angle and use your feet to do that. And if you try to walk straight at someone, you're most likely going to get hit, which is something I've seen from Calvin a lot, is he just walks straight and then he changes angles. I think he needs to change his angle before coming in this fight.
Yeah, Calvin loves to march forward with a high guard, and then once he's in his range, he fires off combos. I just don't think that's going to work against Chikadze. That being said, my pick is still Kattar by KO, although I would not be surprised if Chikadze comes out on top of this one. Moving on to our next matchup, we have Katlyn Chookagian minus 184 versus Jennifer Maia plus 148 in the rematch that nobody asked for. I'm not really sure why they're running this one back, but in the first fight, Katlyn Chookagian out-volumed her She outstruck her 73-58. And Maia only attempted 2 takedowns and succeeded one of them in like the very last 30 seconds of the third round. So I think this is just going to be a rinse and repeat. I think it's going to be the same result as the first fight. Plus, Chookagian's ground game has improved a lot since the first fight. And Maia is just going to be classic Maia, slow. And she really never utilizes wrestling-heavy game plans, which is her bread and butter. So the pick is Chookagian by decision. What about you?
I agree with that. Jennifer Maia is very good on the ground, but she seems to not want to use her skills there. Even at her last fight, she didn't shoot for 1 takedown, which I found very odd. And for my notes on Jennifer, I have that Maia seems to not like being pressured. Every time she's pressured, she likes to keep it at a very, very long range. She definitely has a decent bounce to her to keep her rhythm. And I uses what I call a falling back jab, is where she's scared to enter range, so she'll pull her head back while throwing her hand forward, which if that does land, which it rarely does, it's just going to touch Katlyn, and I don't think it's going to do much. She has good knees in the clinch if she's ever gets there, and she doesn't mix striking very well. It's always 1s and 2s down the pipe. There's no hooks, no uppercuts, no kicks. There's really nothing special to Maia. She kind of just rinse and repeats her 1-2. And when we talk about Katlyn, she works well off her jab. She works very well. She's going to throw 3 to 4 of them out there just to keep you at range, and then she'll fire her straight down the middle, and it usually lands. When you look at her originally, you'll think that she's flat and that she's slow in the middle of the octagon, but she's just being very calm, and she's ready to explode whenever, and her cardio seems very good, as at the end of her bouts, she's still fast, and she still has good defense. And she does need to tuck her chin a little bit. She kind of flips with her chin in the air. And her takedown defense was good when she's in the middle of the octagon, but I noticed if her opponent got her to the cage, that's when it became an issue, and we saw that in the Andrade fight. Obviously, Andrade is one of the best when it comes to cage takedowns, but still something to look out for with Maia. And she does use a front kick very well to keep range. And if she just keeps it at her range, I definitely see Katlyn coming out with a decision once again.
Cool. So we agree on that. Next fight. I have no idea why this isn't the co-main event. I think this is the most exciting fight of the night behind the main event. But we have Brandon Royval at -172 versus Rogério Bontorin at +140. You want to start us off with this one?
Yeah, for sure. The first note I had on this was fight of the night. These guys are very interesting, as they're 125ers and they can move pretty well. What I notice is they never stop moving. There's absolutely nothing in Royval that makes him stop. He's always going to keep moving, and the only thing that actually stopped him was a body lock when he was on the ground. So unless you can get a body lock, be ready to be moving, and you're going to have to try to out-cardio him. And I had a lot of fun watching his film. He has very good vertical movement. I'd like to see him move laterally a bit more. He never stands still. He has a great sneaky strikes from his back. If you put him on his back, he'll throw an up elbow. He'll throw backhands while he's on his back, just kind of touch you. And when he stands up, he has great pressure. He just jab, takedown every time. He targets his opponent's gas tank really well by jabbing up top and throwing a straight to the body. I'd like to see a little more head movement from him. I feel like his head is kind of always on the center line, and he doesn't have his hands as high as they should be. And then when we talk about Bontorin is very patient. So Royval is going to be moving around a lot, and Bontorin is going to kind of be still in the center of the octagon, and he's ready to explode at all times. When his opponent goes to enter, he hits them hard with a check left hook, and I think this is the best form I saw on a hook while watching all of this film. It's textbook around the guard every time. And he moves his head very well. So he's going to be moving his head off that center line, so it's going to be very hard to hit. He gets under punches. He has gorgeous leg kicks and has an insane gas tank. And he's definitely good on the ground. I think if this fight goes to the ground, it's very unlikely that someone gets subbed because they're both such high-level grapplers. I definitely have this as my fight of the night, but I have Bontorin taking it.
Nice. Really interesting. I disagree with you. I'm going with Royval, and the reason why is the cardio and the pace. Honestly, Royval is just so exciting. He beat Kai Kara-France in a sick war. He subbed him in the second round. His striking isn't too consistent. Like Matthew said, it's a little bit fluttery, but his movement makes up for it. His head movement isn't all there, but the way he moves around the cage is just crazy. He fights at a fireball pace, and he lands hard shots when he needs to, although his striking is not too consistent. But his ground game is really where he shines. He's just so wild and scrambly on the ground, and he has sick cardio. He beat Tim Elliott in a crazy fight as a huge dog, which is awesome. And Bontorin really relies on his power more than anything else. And he's pretty big for this division, and he always has trouble with weight. It's going to be really interesting to watch him on the scales for this fight. I don't think his cardio is going to be strong enough to keep up with Royval, and I think Royval is going to catch him. I think Bontorin's best chance to victory is if he catches Royval in a sub early while they're dry. Otherwise, Royval's going to catch him with a knockout or a win by decision, and that's my pick.
Cool.
Moving on. I believe this is actually the co-main event of the night for whatever fucking reason, but we have Chase Sherman at plus 110 versus Jake Collier at minus 134. And look, I think this is my favorite bet of the night. This line is just ridiculously wrong. I don't know why it's so close. Chase Sherman gets cut from the UFC in 2018, fights a bare-knuckle boxing fight, and then one or two fights on the regional scene. Then he re-signs to the UFC in 2020. He beats Ike Villanueva, but then gets popped. Win doesn't get erased. For whatever reason, the win doesn't get changed to a no contest, but he gets punished by USADA. And ever since he came back in 2020, Chase is a one-round fighter. His cardio is awful. Yeah.
It is terrible. When I was watching Chase's fights, I would watch the first round, and then I'd skip to the third to see how his cardio was. And his jab literally looked like ice cream coming out of an ice cream machine. It literally looked like I had the fight in slow motion as he was throwing his jab.
Terrible. Anyways, Collier is the opposite side of the coin. He throws incredible volume, and his cardio is awesome, but he hits kind of soft. His last fight against Carlos Felipe, which he lost, a lot of people screamed robbery. I was on the Carlos Felipe betting side of things, so I'm not going to scream robbery. But I think Carlos Felipe lost that fight. In 3 rounds, he outstruck Felipe 130-94. Like I said, somehow he lost. But the important thing is that Chase Sherman is not going to be able to keep up with him the way that Felipe did. Sherman's going to come out swinging early and trying to knock out Collier because he knows that's his only hope. If Collier can survive, which I think he can, I think he's smart enough to know that is going to be Sherman's game plan. It's almost a foregone conclusion that he's going to win rounds 2 and 3 with pace and volume. Sherman won't last, but he's tough. And Collier doesn't hit hard. He hit Felipe 130 times, and he hit John Vellante 123 times and couldn't knock out either of them. So it's probably a good idea to wait and live bet Collier because he might drop the first round because he'll be fighting a very defensive game plan. But there's no way he's losing the second and third rounds. Collier by decision is the pick, and that's my favorite bet of the night.
I definitely agree with you. And I think when it comes to Collier's power, he actually used to be a middleweight. He was a 185er, so I think that could...
he's not a heavyweight.
No, he's just a fatso. So I think that could play into him not having the power. But for him, he's very an interesting fighter. He had kicks from the big man. He was a middleweight, so he had the kicking background, and then he blew up like a balloon, so his kicks are still there. He has very good leg kicks, and he throws combinations, which is I love to see, especially at heavyweights, because heavyweights are more known for the power punch. We'll throw one at a time and hope it lands. He's throwing combinations, and he throws sick kicks to the body. He has great head movement, and his gas tank was pretty damn good. He seems to hit a lull halfway through the second and then ramp it back up for the third. But the one thing I really liked when I was watching Jake was that even when he gets a little tired, his defense stays sharp. And I think that's really a sign to a great fighter is how you fight when you're tired. And I loved the way he fought. And then Chase Sherman, he has a very heavy leg kick that he throws. He has great head movement and he counters off it well. And I think he did a great job of circling out of strikes instead of backing straight up. But he did get caught by a kick when it was at the end of combos. So if Collier can throw a 1-2 hook and then throw the leg kick, I think that'll land multiple times. He does a great job of having his opponents just barely miss. And his cardio at the end of his last fight was just absolutely awful. So I had in my final fight notes that I think Sherman will win the first round slightly. It'll be a slight Collier in the second, and then Collier will take the third for the win. Definitely agree with you. I'm taking Collier all the way.
Nice. Next fight, we have Joanderson Brito, -138, versus Bill Algeo, +112. You want to start out with this one?
Yeah, for sure. I loved this fight. I actually had a great time watching film on this. I don't like Algeo at all. After watching his film, I don't think he's a good fighter. He also has the worst nickname in the entire UFC, Senor Perfecto. That's awful.
I saw that. That's terrible. Awful. It's terrible.
He literally...
It's up there with the future. That's one of the worst nicknames.
Yeah, because guess what? What happens when you win the title? What are they going to call you? The present? That's a little odd.
That's stupid. But
back to Bill Algeo. The first thing I noticed is that he literally fights with his hands at his waist. Like, you know the Sean O'Malley TikToks where he's like fake teaching people how to fight. He's like, you want your hands to literally be touching the floor.
That's what Bill Algeo.
I'm pretty sure Algeo watched that and took it to heart for his fights. He has sloppy kicks. His kicks are awful. He has his hands down, and then he ducks his head into an uppercut, which I noticed. So he has his hands down, then they throw a strike, and he literally moves his head into the strike. He fights with his mouth open. He has a decent jab from his waist, which makes it hard for his opponents to see, but that's really all he has. He's slow and sloppy. He thinks he has head movement like Prime Anderson Silva, but he's getting hit 2 out of every 3 strikes, which made me laugh my ass off while watching him, thinking he was the shit while getting his face battered in. He actually had one good spinning back kick, which I noticed, but he also cannot defend a takedown. But when we're moving on to Brito, he's a 26-year-old making his UFC debut, I believe. And
coming off a Contender Series.
Yeah, the first thing, I watched that Contender Series fight, and the first thing I wrote down for him was, bro, this motherfucker is explosive as fuck.
And strong. He is strong.
Yeah, he started his last fight, runs out, flying knee, gets a takedown. He's definitely not afraid to be in a fight, and that's very important, especially in your first UFC bout, not being afraid of getting hit or not making the moment too big. He had cool shoulder strikes on the ground, and he throws nasty, hard leg kicks. He does have a tendency to not move his head and he thinks about his offense more than his defense, and he gets hit quite a bit. He's very wild, and he swings for the fences a lot, so if he can calm that down and kind of stay within himself and stay within his form, I think his cardio will get improved because of that, and he'll stay in the fight for longer. But he's definitely a showman, and what Dana White is looking for, like we mentioned in our last podcast, he wants someone who's going to be a showman, and he definitely has it in Brito. And if he can learn to move his head and not throw as many wild punches, he has a bright future. I think this is my favorite bet of the night. I don't see it going any way except for Brito winning, and I definitely think it will not be a decision. It will be a knockout.
Yep, I totally agree with you. I mean, Algeo is weak. He's too weak for this division. He got taken down 8 times in 3 rounds by Ricardo Ramos. And Britos is the opposite. He's incredibly strong and explosive and has very good takedowns and employs a very power-heavy game plan, both in striking and grappling. So I think Brito should easily be able to back up Algeo, land better shots, and get the fight to the ground whenever he wants to, if he wants to. The only thing Algeo has in his corner is experience, but I don't think it'll be enough. I don't think it's going to make up for his lack of strength, or I don't think it's going to make up for Brito's young 26-year-old heart. Yeah, I have Brito by submission, but it could definitely be a knockout. I think the best way to go about this fight would be Brito inside the distance.
Yeah, I agree.
Moving on. Jamie Pickett, +122. Going up against another UFC newcomer, Joseph Holmes, at -150. I'll start us off with this one. Yeah, like I said, this is Holmes' UFC debut. He's 7-1, all 7 wins coming by finish, 2 knockouts and 5 subs. He won a Contender Series fight by submission, but didn't earn a contract because he's just so inexperienced, and you could see that. Dana White could see that. He usually relies on his big 80-inch reach to overwhelm his opponents. However, Pickett matches him in that 80-inch reach, so it's not going to be that useful for him. And Pickett is way more experienced and stronger. This one's quick and easy. Holmes could win if he's smart and maintains his striking range and, stick and move in order to out-volume Pickett. However, I see Pickett's experience and strength prevailing, and he'll utilize clinch work and takedowns. It's not a confident underdog pick, but the pick is Pickett by decision.
I completely disagree with you.
Really?
I think outside of Algeo, I think Pickett was my least impressive fighter that I watched while studying for this card. My notes on Pickett, he seems to bite on every feint that's thrown at him. Even if a jab is thrown, and you know this because you fight, if a jab's thrown but you know you're not in range, you're not going to back up, you're not going to bite on it. But he seems to run across the octagon every time there was a feint or a jab. He fights with his chin hanging out in the air with his hands very low. And when I was watching his fights, when he gets put up against the cage, he has no answer that I saw. He gets taken down. He cannot reverse it very well. He did have a good knee in the clinch. His kicks have no form and no setup. He kind of just throws naked blind kicks that kind of go straight up instead of connecting with his target properly. He's a power puncher who relies on this one big shot and really has no answer in the grappling department from what I saw. And then Joseph Holmes. Holmes is making his UFC debut. Like we mentioned, he's an exciting young fighter. He lost his first professional bout and then rattled off 7 wins since. I noticed he has great bounce to keep his rhythm. And he likes his right body kick against southpaws. I know this is not going to work against Pickett, but it's just something to look forward to in the future. He jumped in on a gorgeous guillotine in one of his fights while he was getting taken down and choked the guy to sleep. He has a great jab that keeps his distance like you talked about, even though Pickett can match him. I like the way Holmes uses his reach. Sometimes when you look at reach advantage, it's not just about what the numbers say, it's about how the fighter uses it, and I loved the way Holmes used his reach. And he just blasts outside kicks against orthodox fighters. So my final note was that if Holmes can get over the initial nerves of being in the UFC, I see him winning. He should use his reach to stay away from that one power punch of Pickett and then look to counter with kicks and ultimately take him down. So I definitely have Holmes winning.
Cool. Yeah, like I said, it's not a confident dog play whatsoever. It's not a play that I'm going to be making. But my pick, I'm going with the experience on this one. Unlike Bill Algeo, I'm going with the experience. Anyways, next matchup, Ramiz Brahimaj -110 versus Court McGee -110. We have a straight pick'em. Court McGee's a machine. He'll always fight for your dollar, meaning he'll just never give up. You know, you see some guys give up in fights. They get tired. They close their guard and they sit on bottom. When I say this guy's going to fight for your dollar, that means he or she is never going to do that. And Court McGee is a guy who's going to fight for your dollar. Before he was in the UFC, he died in a drug overdose, and then he won the Ultimate Fighter like 10, 12 years ago, something like that. He actually was on the Ultimate Fighter as a wild card, lost his first fight, and then got brought back as another wild card because somebody got injured and ended up winning, which is just awesome. So you know he's resilient, but he has questionable skills, and he has no ring IQ, plus he's old as fuck. And honestly, his cardio is his best weapon. Brahimaj is a BJJ world champion. He's amazing on the ground. He has 9 wins in MMA, all of them via first-round submission. He has very good takedowns and, like I said before, insane jiu-jitsu. So I really think this is his fight to lose. Although McGee's never been subbed, but we have seen a lot of crazy submissions in the past year, you know, like Jacare Souza getting submitted, which we never thought we would see. So I would not be surprised. My only concern is that Brahimaj probably won't land his first takedown or even his first couple like he's used to. So I'm not really sure how he's going to respond to that type of adversity. But regardless, the pick is Brahimaj by sub. But I wouldn't be surprised by a decision.
I also disagree on this fight. Watching McGee, I absolutely love this guy. I know he's old. He's never going to be...
Dude, he has no ring IQ.
Dude,
I know. When he's ever made a good decision.
I'm not saying he makes good decisions. I'm saying he was entertaining to watch.
Yeah.
My notes on him is that he looks like a BJJ guy because he always went for takedowns right away in the fights that I watched. He seems to have pretty good timing on them. He did get caught in a single leg, but he stayed very calm, which I think just shows how much of a veteran he is. A lot of young guys, when they get caught in a takedown attempt, they panic and end up going down. But the court stayed very calm and ended up working out of it. He has great strays down the middle. It's just going to be 1-2 right down the pipe. His takedown defense was phenomenal from what I saw. He was able to sprawl, get his hands in front of his hips, and push him off almost every time in the fights that I watched. Against Condit, he showed that he likes to stay at range, and he uses his kicks very well when he's there. And if the opponent comes in on McGee, instead of using dirty boxing, he's going to look to take him down, which could be interesting against Ramiz. And he showed good kickboxing in the Condit fight, even though he lost it. And then my notes on Ramiz was that he showed great patience with explosive combos and great setups, which was very important for me because I think a strike is as good as the setup. You could have the best form on a kick of all time, but if you throw it blind, it's not going to land 9 out of 10 times. Or if you can kind of mask it with a 1-2 with a hook, even if it's not a great kick, it's going to land more times than not. He's an explosive, hard jab. As the fight went longer that I watched, he got hit with quite a few quick jabs, just kind of reminded me of the Rob Font versus Cody Garbrandt, where Garbrandt was just getting his face jabbed off a little bit. He seems to have a great chin and decent cardio. Now you might look at his notes and be like, oh, but he got knocked out. He didn't really get knocked out. His ear fell off. Literally, his ear fell off. So that was the reason they had to end the fight. The takedown he secured for his first UFC win was sloppy, and I don't think McGee will get caught in it. I have the slightest edge for McGee in this fight. I would not be surprised if Ramiz won. I saw slightly better stand-up from McGee, and I think he'll be able to avoid the quick explosions, and he'll be able to defend the sloppy takedowns towards the end, and he'll be too sharp at the start to get taken down. So I have McGee edging out a decision win.
Yeah, the bookies definitely got this one right. It's for sure a pick 'em. It could go either way. Coin flip fight. Next matchup, one of two incredibly short notice fights of the night. TJ Brown minus 280 versus the short notice replacement Charles Rosa at plus 220. Charles Rosa's taking this fight on extreme short notice. Matthew, what do you think? How does he do?
I think he fares well. I really do. I think it was funny. I saw on Twitter the other day that Rosa has gone loss, win, loss, win, loss, win, loss, win since 2018, and his last fight was a loss. So because of that, I just got to go with a win. He's got to keep that going. But for my real notes, TJ Brown was unimpressive. He likes to stay at a very far distance and gets flustered when someone attacks him. His front kick up the middle doesn't look bad, but he does a good job of always keeping his hand in the opponent's face, which is nice. So if his opponent can get within striking range, Brown does a very good job. Even if it's not a jab meant to hit, his arm is going to be out, making Rosa look around it and avoid it, which is something we work on a lot at the gym. But something I noticed, which was a bad habit from TJ, is that he circles towards the power. And if you don't fight, what that means is if my right hand is my power hand, you want to circle towards my left hand, so it's harder for me to land that power. But TJ was circling towards the right hand a lot. And a bad habit that I saw is he drops his hands and ducks at the first sign of pressure. Instead of keeping his hands up, he's going to bring his nose to his belly button and just shell up. Which then leads to uppercuts and everything in that area. His jab got countered later in the fights, even though he's keeping it in the face. His opponents were able to move their head and counter him. He switched stances nicely to avoid a few punches. Good boxing, and also got his opponents a little hurt. Also seems pretty good on the ground with 9-3 sub ratio. And then Charles Rosa, he looked slow off the bat against Damon Jackson. His jab was labored with no sense of urgency. Good takedown, immediately looked for a leg lock, so that shows that Rosa's always going to be looking to end a fight quickly. He has good pressure and a gorgeous spinning back elbow in the last fight, so he has good timing on interesting strikes, and he had great grappling. So if Rosa's cardio can hold up on the short notice fight, I see him winning. He'll look to pressure Brown and then take him down, and Rosa's never been submitted in the UFC, and I think he'll be able to get on top and ground out a classic journeyman battle.
I completely disagree.
Cool.
I think it's way too short notice for me to pick Rosa. I just can't count on his gas tank being prepared. Not saying he is a bad gas tank, but TJ Brown has had a 8 to 12 week fight camp to prepare for this 3-round battle, and we don't know what Charles Rosa has been doing. I mean, with all these professional fighters, you have to assume that they're always in shape, but as you and I both know, fight shape is different than being in shape. So we're going to have to see how the cardio holds up. Anyways, as far as my notes go, just basic on Charles Rosa. I have he's a submission fighter with pretty terrible takedown defense. He loves to throw subs up from his back, but he doesn't usually get them. He only has 2 or 3 submission wins in the UFC. And TJ Brown's a tough dude. His striking isn't all the way there, but he's tough. My big reasoning is that he was preparing for Gabriel Benitez, who is a big power kicker and a big power striker. So my thinking is that he was planning a takedown-heavy game plan, which is also going to work on Rosa. So I see TJ Brown sitting in Rosa's guard for the majority of this fight, and Brown's winning a decision. That's just my thoughts.
I agree. I mean, I don't agree. I think Rosa's going to win, but like you said earlier, this is one of my not-so-confident picks. If I was going to bet on this card, this is not a bet that I would actually place. That's just what I was thinking, but I would not be surprised if TJ came out on top.
All right, moving on. Dakota Bush, plus 152, welcoming another UFC newcomer. We're going to give this one a try. Vyacheslav Borshchev, minus 188. Borshchev making his UFC debut. I'm going to call him Bors. How about that?
That works.
Sorry, Borshchev, if I'm saying your name wrong, if you ever hear this.
Borshev.
Borshev? Okay,
Yeah.
Okay, I can do that. Borshev making his UFC debut. He's coming off a sick second-round knockout on the Contender Series. Listen, he's the striking coach at Team Alpha Male, so you know his striking is absolutely on point. His takedown defense is kind of questionable, but he's really skilled at getting up off his feet. You know, all the training at Team Alpha Male, that is primarily a team of wrestlers. And I know that was your pick for most fadeable gym of the year, but if you are a striking coach at a high-level MMA gym, you're a damn good striker. Yeah, like I said, training at Team Alpha Male, you have to be good at getting up off your feet because that gym just houses good wrestlers. Dakota Bush is also tough, but he likes to strike. And in order to win this fight, he's going to have to utilize takedowns, and I don't think he's even going to be strong enough to hold Borshev down. If he gets him down, Borshev should be able to keep the fight standing very easily and get back up to his feet fast enough whenever Bush takes him down. I think Borshev's power punches will be too much for Bush to handle for 3 rounds, and Borshev is going to catch him by the end. Borshev by KO is the pick. What about you?
I disagree again.
Oh, my goodness.
Let's
hear it.
I'm not going to say that you're completely wrong because I could definitely see Borshev catching Bush. But I liked Bush. I mean, he opened up with a very strong jab in the fights that I watched. He showed good movement off the bat with his head was moving. He landed great uppercuts off his slips. They're just quick, short punches. He had a good spinning back fist. And he doesn't mask his kicks well. He just throws them naked, which is something he needs to work on. If he learns to set up his kicks and everything like that, he will have great success. He had a little bit of mouth open breathing, and he had a little bit of a cardio issue. He shot for the classic tired, weak hips out takedown, which isn't going to work in the UFC. But what I saw from Borshev is he backs up in a straight line, which I thought was very confusing for me, knowing he's the striking coach. He wasn't circling like a high-level striker usually does. He had a good jab and good kick. He looks very patient, which doesn't surprise me being a striking coach. His lead hand was phenomenal, but I actually didn't see anything special from his right hand. It was basically all jabs and check hooks. There was no real power punches in the fights that I watched. He has the cover up and let the shots bounce off the gloves approach a lot. And he waited for his opponents to get tired and then exploded. He had a wild cartwheel kick, but at the end of the first, he got tired at the end of the first round in the fights that I watched, and then he started to get caught. He has good check hooks, but like, I just can't go for Team Alpha Male. I see this fight going for Bush. I think he'll have the more calculated aggression in his second time out in the UFC. If he watches out for the short flurries of Borshchev and hits him with check hooks, I think he has a chance to actually hit Borshchev hard as he enters. So I do have Bush actually winning this fight.
Interesting. Anyways, moving on. I believe this is our last fight of the episode.
Yeah.
Our second short notice fight of the night. Brian Kelleher. Boom! Brian Boom Kelleher. Minus 290 versus Kevin Croom. Plus 235. Why don't you start us off with this one?
Brian Kelleher, I thought he was impressive in the film I watched, even though he's an older guy. He has great pressure and he shoots for takedowns right away. In the opening 10 seconds against Pilarte, he jab, cross, takedown. He finishes his takedowns beautifully. I mean, I was with my cursor skipping through fights, and it seemed like every time I clicked on a random moment in the fight was either on the ground or Kelleher had his opponent over his shoulder about to throw him. He showed great top pressure but failed to pass the guard. I wasn't sure if that was because he couldn't do it or because he just didn't try. In the second round, he did a good job of cutting off the octagon and moving laterally to make sure that his opponent didn't have anywhere to go. He seems to have a pretty decent guillotine. He has great kick defense and always finds a way to get the takedown. So if he gets put in a bad spot, he will find a way to get Croom to the ground. And he has decent stand-up being as much of a veteran as he is. And when it comes to Kevin Croom, he starts out with long straights to close the distance. He looked for a shot in one of his fights. It was a very ugly takedown. He immediately abandoned it as he should. He throws a great 1-2-1-2 to close the distance, but doesn't protect himself as he does. So when he's throwing his strikes, I notice his chin floating in the air, easily countered. And Croom started the second round off of his last bout, mouth breathing and tired. So his cardio seems to be an issue, and he's taking this fight on 3 days' notice. So I have Kelleher winning. I think Kelleher is very explosive and takes the fight where he wants it. I think he dictates where the fight takes place. And I just think fighting a guy like Croom on 3 days' notice, I think Kelleher takes this.
I totally agree with you. Kevin Croom is 0-1-1 in the UFC. He subbed Roosevelt Roberts in 30 seconds, but the fight was actually later declared a no contest because Croom tested positive for marijuana. Unfortunate.
Bullshit.
Luckily, those rules have since changed. Anyways, he is a hard hitter and has an extremely aggressive style, but that aggressive style only lasts about 3 minutes. And he's nowhere near as strong as Kelleher. He attempted 16 takedowns in his loss against Alex Caceres, was successful at none of them, and Alex Caceres isn't big. So that does not bode well for him, especially in a matchup with Brian Kelleher, who's very strong, hits very hard, and like you said, has great takedowns. And like I just said, he's very strong for this division, which is going to be a big problem for Kevin Croom. Brian Kelleher is old, but he has a lot of experience, and unlike Court McGee, has great fight IQ. He's fought really tough opposition in the past, like Marlon Vera, like Renan Brau, like John Lineker. So yeah, Croom's taking this fight on even shorter notice than Charles Rosa, which is not good, especially for a guy who notoriously has cardio issues. His only chance in this fight is to catch Kelleher early with a hard shot, but Brian is too tough and smart, so Brian is definitely grinding out a wrestling-heavy decision, and the pick is Kelleher by decision.
Yeah.
So that does it for our breakdowns. Just so you guys know, I should have said this at the beginning, but just so you guys know the way this is going to work when we do breakdowns, we're going to go fight by fight. Matthew and I, we're going to give you our opinions. Sometimes we're going to agree, sometimes we're going to disagree. Then at the very end, we're just going to run down the card top to bottom, starting with the main event, and we're just going to go through our picks. Then we'll go through and give you guys our best bets. That's 2 or 3 bets, maybe a parlay, maybe a prop. Let's do 1 parlay, 1 prop, and 1 straight bet. How about that?
All right.
Those will be our best bets.
Let's do
and
it.
Then on Saturday of fight morning on Instagram, we're each going to post our cards, our official picks. They might change from the episode because we record these in advance. However, the official picks will be available on Instagram at Family Fights Pod on Saturday. I don't know what time they'll be up, but I promise they'll be up before the fights, so you guys will have time to place your bets. Anyways, let's do the rundown. I will start. The picks are Calvin Kattar, Brandon Royval, Jake Collier, Joanderson Brito, Jamie Pickett, Ramiz Brahimaj, TJ Brown, Vilashel Borshev, Brian Kelleher. Those are the picks. How about you?
My picks from top to bottom on the card are going to be Chikadze, Collier, Bontorin, Chookagian, Bush, Brito, and then for the prelims, it's going to be Holmes, McGee, Kelleher, and Rosa.
Cool. And best bets, I'll start. My best straight bet of the night is got to be Jake Collier. When I made the notes for this fight on FanDuel, my favorite sports book, shout out FanDuel, he was sitting at -134. I bet you his line has been bet a little bit wider, but that's my favorite straight bet of the night. What about you?
I'm gonna give you two. One's an easy out with Kelleher. As we spoke about, we don't really see any way that he loses this fight. And then my favorite one is gonna be Chookagian at -185. I think that line should be at probably about 250 for her.
Nice. My favorite prop is also Jake Collier. Jake Collier by decision. That's at +155. I think getting plus money on that decision prop alone is nice, let alone +155. So go snatch that up while you can. What about you for prop?
I'm going to go with the Brito fight not going the distance.
I like it. All right. Moving on to parlays. I'm going to make a parlay here with Brian Kelleher, with Katlyn Chookagian, and with Brandon Royval.
Okay.
That's going to be my parlay.
All right, let's go through this. I think my parlay is going to be with Kelleher, Brito, Chookagian, and Collier. And if you're on BetMGM, those odds are at +532. So a $100 bet will get you $632 in return.
Yep, and like I said, guys, official picks and bets will be out Saturday morning of the card. These are just our initial impressions. These are not our official bets. These are just for fun. My official bets will be out Saturday morning. Matthews will not be coming out because he's 17.
That's right.
Wink, wink. Anyways, thank you all very much for tuning into another episode of the Family Fights podcast. We love you guys. We love doing this. We can't wait to get better at our breakdowns for you. Guys, this was our first breakdown. I think we killed it. What do you think?
I think so too. I mean, I know you've done breakdowns in the past and you've sent them to me before. This was my first time ever doing a breakdown other than one fight, which was the Poirier fight, which I got right. So technically I'm 100%. If you guys notice anything that we did right, did wrong, you can reach out on the socials, Family Fights Pod, or at familyfightspodcast@gmail.com. Let us know. We'd love to hear what you guys think of the podcast, and it was a good one.
Yeah, we can't wait to keep improving our skills for you guys. We'll be back on Monday with all of our reactions to the card. We'll be talking about the action that went down. We'll be talking about what we got right in our breakdowns, what we got wrong, doing a little reflecting on what we can learn, what we can improve on for next time. Yeah, can't wait to see you guys next time. Got anything to add, Matthew?
If you guys have any current events or anything you want to hear us talk about that we didn't talk about, reach out on the socials, and we'll do our best to get your guys' ideas on the podcast.
All right, I think we're out. See you guys next time.
Have a good day, everyone. The Family Fights podcast will be releasing every Monday and every Friday. In the episodes, we look back at the most recent card, give updates and opinions on the UFC and other MMA news, as well as matchmake and tell you what to look forward to in the next card. Our Instagram and Twitter are the Family Fights Pod, and you can reach out at familyfightspodcast@gmail.com. Have a good day, everyone.
Family Fights. Let's do it.